Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? It's your boy Isaac,
And this is your boy Bryce.
and we are Brothers on Tennis. And folks, we've got another round with one of our absolute favorite lawyers. We've got Mr. Paul S. Haberman on the show. And boy, oh boy, are we going to talk about some fun things, right, Bryce?
Absolutely. See, he should have never told us that we have a resource to talk to when all this stuff starts hitting the fan, right? Because clearly the players got the message at Wimbledon that we can let stuff hit the fan. You know?
Exactly.
They knew.
Exactly. So, Paul, welcome back to Brothers on Tennis. And we were just chatting a few minutes ago about the number of situations that have occurred since we've last talked that have either some sort of legal or rules or regulations type of impact here. So I think what we'll do is we'll let you kick it off and we'll chime in on these various scenarios.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. And I could certainly MC the scenarios here if desired. I guess the first one to start with was probably one of the better publicized ones, and it actually wasn't really an issue at all. It was just that the crowd didn't entirely know what was going on. And that was the handshake or lack thereof at the end of Vika Azarenka and Elena Svitolina's match. There was some talk, or a lot of talk, at least in the arena, it looked like on the court there, that about Azarenka just kind of waving or not shaking hands with Svitolina after the match, and she was booed. But generally you would expect that would fall under the Grand Slam rulebook's unsportsmanlike conduct definition, except that as she explained it later, that was sort of an understanding between Svitolina as a Ukrainian and all Russian and Belarusian players that they would not. So it was Azarenka's position that it was out of respect to her and understanding how she was conducting herself as a result of the conflict in Ukraine, that she didn't shake hands or embrace other in any form or fashion at the end of the match.
Yeah, so, it seems interesting with that topic because we have been seeing that more and more, this year. I mean, we saw that in the finals, I believe it was with, Kostyuk. Kostyuk was in a final, and she's from the Ukraine against a Russian player. And, she fell to the ground, did her celebration, and there was absolutely no exchange at all between those two players. And it is very disappointing when you're seeing, them not being able to or not exchanging, any either thanks or gratitude.
Yeah, and I will say that I think Svitolina was the one that talked about it. It was an agreement that all the Ukrainian players had. Right. So, and from what I understand, other than kind of Sabalenka spoke out and said how much it bothered her, it seemed like everybody kind of understood. Right. In terms of the players, the Ukrainians had this agreement. This is the way it was going to be. The fans in the audience may not have been aware. And so when they're used to seeing a non-handshake at the end of a match, that's typically considered, bad sportsmanship,
right?
Or they're really upset about something. But, this was an agreement that the Ukrainian players made amongst themselves that they were not going to shake hands with the Belarusians and the Russians. So I don't think it was as much drama between them as it was, like I think maybe Paul was saying, a lack of understanding from the audience.
Right. I mean, at that point, if you had players from, say, I don't know, Andorra and Australia not shaking hands at the net, that's a more flagrant violation. There's absolutely no reason for that. So, other than bad sportsmanship. So this has been readily explained, just not apparent to everybody on center court that day. So.
Right. And Paul, I want to ask just for clarity too. Not shaking an opponent's hand at the end of the match, that's not against a rule, right? That's just considered bad sportsmanship, but there's not a rule that's being broken, or am I incorrect on that?
I think it could be interpreted as a violation, but I think the fact that it happens at the end of the match and perhaps cognizant of people's emotions at times following losses, you probably wouldn't see it enforced as much as you would other ones that happen, say, during the match itself. But I think officially, if you wanted to make an issue out of it, it could classify as unsportsmanlike conduct.
Oh, okay.
But it's almost moot at that point because, well, I mean, they're still being paid by the tournament, so theoretically they could be docked pay. But that's the end for the person that usually doesn't shake hands. So in this case, there was the person that won that has declined to shake hands with anyone from Russia or Belarus. But but generally, you would expect the loser would be the one that wouldn't want to, and that kind of has context to it. I've seen things similar here and there in professional boxing, which, as you guys know, I have clients in, and maybe they'll embrace or something, with one dramatic exception about 20 years ago. But you will hear some very unfortunate things in post-fight interviews with losers sometimes. That if boxing had more of a code of conduct like that, would be questionable too. But then you're taking disappointment, or exhausted, all sorts of factors by the end of a competition, whether it's boxing or tennis. So at that point.
Gotcha. Okay. So what is the next one?
Well, the next one, I think it's worth introducing this one match in particular. I can't say I watched everything, but one particular match, Madison Keys versus the young Russian Mira Andreeva, seemed to have two particularly interesting issues to discuss here. First was what appeared to be potentially, although she was pretty vociferously contesting it, a code of conduct violation by Andreeva after she appeared to throw her racket late in the match, which she claimed she had lost balance. It was interesting to see that in the replay because it wasn't that clear, but it looked like she kind of fired it off, but she was also tripping at the same time, or coming off of a play that she had missed at the same time. So that would be a code of conduct violation for equipment abuse. But then at the same time, probably around the same set, she was also having an issue, and she being Andreeva, with the chair umpire because there was a challenge to a call that was made that apparently wasn't audible for one reason or another. And all things equal, you could make a request for a verification of a call between plays as long as it's done timely. But they considered by the time they actually heard her to be untimely, it didn't actually take up the call because of essentially audibility issues ultimately, which was frustrating to her as well. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to see that match, but it was an interesting showcase of beginning a young prospect and an old veteran, and then kind of evolved into the veteran taking over, and then some interesting opportunities for regulatory analysis here.
Absolutely. No, I actually got a chance to watch that match, Paul, and it was a great match. I mean, Mira Andreeva played a really, really, really solid match against Keys and had her on the ropes. I mean, it was a fantastic match.
Right.
I agree with you with the initial racket abuse call. That one, I don't know. For a young player, it could be interpreted both ways, because she was frustrated. She was kind of throwing the racket, but like you said, she was kind of tripping as well. So it kind of was amplified by that factor. And for me, I didn't think that it was that egregious that it needed to be, a call. I mean, especially at that point in the match, you see that she is kind of losing control of the match, because that's when Madison Keys started flipping things around and really started gaining the momentum. I didn't necessarily think that was the best call, but at the same time, it was correct. I don't think that it was, how some people make a blatant, like, incorrect call. It was not incorrect. It was more, in my opinion, a judgment call that maybe they didn't have to call it, but chose to. I definitely saw how much it frustrated her. And then on the line call, that one, again, for her, you've got to make sure that you are really, making it apparent to the chair umpire that you want to challenge something. You can't, you can't go and observe and do all of these other things like some players do and expect for them then to just allow you to, oh yeah, sure, you can challenge. Now, no, you've got, I mean, they say it at the beginning of the match when they're at the net talking, they're like, if you're going to challenge, make it audible and be quick about it.
Right,
Otherwise, you got to move on. And I think that that's what happened there. And unfortunately for her, again, it was at that point where she was really losing or had lost control of the match. And that's what amplified the frustration.
Great. Yeah, and it's certainly one to grow on for her. And going forward, all sorts of lessons to take out of that one, not just from the tennis play itself, but from the regulatory issues as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, she's young, though, and extremely talented. So she will learn.
Yep. So I guess another issue we could discuss or really revisit from the last time, because I touched on it last time, just kind of noticed it during Wimbledon, obviously, when it came into effect, is the Wimbledon rule on wearing all white was had an exception carved out for women's undergarments for this starting this tournament. And I think, as you could see, not that everybody's focused on that, they certainly took advantage of that. There's no shortage of darker undergarments in this tournament, which was what they were arguing for many years to begin with. Enough said, as far as I'm concerned. But was it? It seemed like it was a long time coming, unless you guys disagree for any reason.
No.
No, and the funny thing for me is I didn't even recognize the change for a long time until I heard one of the commentators, make a comment on it. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I saw it and I was like, okay, that's new. But honestly, like you, Bryce, I didn't really think much about it. I just figured that, they relaxed it a little bit, but apparently they didn't relax it enough for Ons Jabeur when she went out to practice before the final, coming out there in all black.
Right.
They promptly sent her right back to the hotel and said, no, sis.
Right. And for the listeners to understand the issue with Ons wearing all black in a practice, which is fine on the outside courts.
Outside courts, right.
But on the show courts, that's where you still had to be in the all white.
That's right. Those fun rules. Wimbledon rules, folks. Wimbledon rules.
Yeah.
No flash at all, just a respect for the ground. But speaking of respect for the grounds, certainly Djokovic is basically a demigod there at this point. But there's a hat trick, to borrow a hockey term, of Djokovic-related incidents that are probably worth mentioning here today too. I guess we should start in chronological order. He was called for a somewhat obscure call of hindrance in his match with Jannik Sinner, and kind of lost his poise for a moment after that. And the interesting thing with a hindrance call, which is basically an interruption of your opponent's serve or game in some form or fashion, is the opponent will win a point if it's intentional, but if it's deemed unintentional, you would simply replay. And I don't remember how it ultimately came out in that match, but Djokovic certainly wasn't happy with that call originally.
Right. And for me, this is one of those where when they showed the replay, it was clear that was the right call. Because, and maybe this is me understanding as a player too, if you grunt or whatever, that typically happens during the course of the stroke, right? Once you've made the stroke and you're in your backswing, you're not really exhaling anything at that point, right? And in this particular situation that you're talking about, Djokovic is continuing a yell while the ball is over on center side of the court right before he's getting ready to hit it. And so for me, I don't think it was, and this is me kind of defending Djokovic a little bit, I don't think that was in his mind like, oh, I'm going to try to yell long enough so that I can disrupt center because Djokovic knows he doesn't have to do that to win. Right? But I do think in my neighborhood or in my hood, this was a simple case of just being what we call extra. And he was being extra on that yell and that call, and he got called for it. And I thought it was correct.
Yeah. Another little piece to add into that, Bryce, is I think it has to do a lot with, kind of your patterns as a player or how you grunt and what have you, because other players sort of have that same grunt where it extends into the other player's court when they're about to hit the ball. But I think because they're consistent with it, they don't get called for it. Whereas with Djokovic, he's not known for grunting. So that grunt, like you said, it was extra. He was trying to put a little something on it and let out he continued to grunt. And I honestly think that also kind of played into it a little bit, because when you're not used to someone doing something like that or having an extended grunt, it comes out of the blue and you're like, yeah, that's a hindrance and I'm going to call that. But, some of the other players, that we've seen over the years, their grunts have definitely been very extended. But because they're consistent, which is not necessarily a good thing, but the fact that they are, I believe that's the reason why they didn't necessarily always get called, but the reasoning behind Djokovic getting called. Being extra. That's what it costs being extra, Paul. Don't be extra.
It reminds me, I got my wife, since we watched Jersey Shore a good amount, especially early in our relationship, a T-shirt, kind of a stocking stuffer a year or two back, extra AF.
Yeah, we'll send one of those to Novak. Give it to him when we see him in Cincinnati.
He's earned it. It's available at the Stitch store online if you're looking for it.
I love that.
But continuing on the Djokovic party, he, like Andreeva and Tiafoe in the match in which he lost as well, also had some pretty flagrant racket abuse in the final against Alcaraz there, where he basically hit a home run off the net pole there. So surprisingly, only fined $8,000, which they're calling a record. Since the conduct code provides for as much as a $20,000 fine and a potential point penalty for that. And I don't think he was assessed a point either at the time, unless you guys remember differently.
He was not.
Okay.
Correct.
That was as epic a meltdown I've seen from him since earlier in his career. So.
And my feeling on that, Paul, is that, funny enough, I think they gave him, I don't know, they gave him an allowance, in my opinion, because
he has bank goodwill. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're at Wimbledon. This is the most prestigious tournament. Those grounds are hallowed. They are precious. So for you to take your racket intentionally and damage a post, to me, I felt that was absolutely flagrant, and he should have been charged the maximum as far as a penalty goes, in my opinion, because again, you just don't do that. And if it were a regular player that had done that, they might be looking at not inviting them back to Wimbledon.
Exactly.
So I think they gave Djokovic a big time allowance for that, because to me, I was very disappointed with that conduct in a final. You've got all these people, entertainment, everybody's out there watching this match, loving this match. And for you to do something like that, it did not sit well with me personally.
Yeah, I think Wimbledon felt bad for him. They were like, this little kid is putting them things on him, and his head is twisted right now, and he don't really know what's going on. So we're gonna go light on him.
You know what? He showed a lot of poise against Kyrgios last year when Kyrgios was having a meltdown.
Right.
I just watched Match Point the other day. It's like he was the grown up there. What happened in a year's time here?
Oh, it depends on the day with that one.
Yes, it does.
Oh, wow. And then, of course, leading up to Alcaraz and Djokovic in the final, there was the whole again, the second non-scandal scandal of the tournament with Papa Alcaraz filming Djokovic's practice session, which just looking quickly in the rule book, despite all the fuss made about it, there doesn't seem to be an express violation. And I think the important point that was made in the press, that to the extent people were really analyzing it, was that there is no what you would call in criminal law reasonable expectation of privacy in the courts there at Wimbledon. If you're practicing outside where anybody else could see you, and there's probably any number of people practicing to one side or the other, the idea that something would get recorded, especially these days, whether by fan or father, shouldn't be that shocking to the conscience.
I totally agree. And like I told you earlier, I have recorded players' practices, that we've put on social media. And my thing is, if you want a private practice, then you go rent out a private facility and you practice there. But if you are on the grounds for the tournament, that's public. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I completely agree.
I mean, scouting is allowed.
Right. I mean, taking contrast, it's my understanding that when Djokovic comes here for the U.S. Open, he stays on a pretty palatial property in Alpine, New Jersey, and to the extent that the Alpine, New Jersey address has tennis courts, that would be more of an intrusion if somebody, was sneaking onto the grounds or ran a drone over it or something like that. That would be more inappropriate than we're talking about here.
Exactly. Yeah, I still am curious as to what Papa Alcaraz was thinking, though. It's like, y'all know everything about Djokovic at this point. He got footage and film everywhere.
There's a little bit of film on him at this point, yes.
He may have been getting into Novak's head at that point.
Yeah, you never know.
We got tricks.
Oh, wow.
That's good. Okay.
Was there anything else you guys noticed from the tournament in particular that stood out? Those were again, I didn't watch everything, but those were the sort of the incidents that either made press or really kind of stood out to me when I was watching either way.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't. I didn't record anything else, Paul. Bryce, how about you?
Yeah, no, I can't think of anything else that stuck out to me.
Okay. So, well, there was another one we did discuss off camera or off mic here. You wanted to talk about Ymer.
Yes. Let's talk about it.
Woo.
Yes, I mean, I had personally heard about this and it seemed like it was out of nowhere. But then when I was doing my research on this, that decision to ban him for 18 months, which was actually at ITF's request originally 2 years, came down from the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is basically the court of last chance, pretty much, for this sort of dispute. The ITF had actually appealed it up to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, who knocked it down by a few months. And unless Ymer now goes to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland, that's pretty much what it is. There's no other levels to this. So,
well, Paul, let me ask you this question. What concerned me about this case when I first heard about it was the fact that Mikael said that he was found guilty or whatever and assessed the suspension, and then his case was heard by independent arbitrators, an independent review panel that was selected by the ITF, and they ended up saying they overturned it, and so then the ITF appealed it being overturned.
Yeah, that's an interesting state of affairs, I gotta say. But the other interesting thing too that people might want to point to is that it was a series of whereabouts violations.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Ymer actually came up dirty on anything. He
did not. And these
Correct.
were 3 out of competition randoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to add this. and I'm not using no names because I'm not having nobody come back and say Bryce said
Bryce
that
said that
I
you said,
said,
right?
but I have heard from
Yep.
several people
Mm.
that there have been a number of higher profile professional tennis players who have missed 3 out of competition random tests and nothing happened.
Nada.
Nothing happened to them. And so it made it sound like this particular type of offense is very subjective in terms of when they choose to go after somebody or not. And for those people who maybe don't keep up, Mikael Ymer has always been a very outspoken person, right? On different things. And so there is a thought that there is some sort of retribution going on here against him for being so outspoken about so many things on the tour, that they're going after him.
Right.
And they also sacked him after one of his best wins. Didn't he knock off Taylor Fritz recently?
They did. Hey,
Yes.
look,
Absolutely.
don't mess with the top Americans.
Well, and I wonder if it came to a boiling point when he was at that one tournament. I can't remember the details, but remember there was an issue with the chair umpire making a horrible call. And he at that point it just boiled over, and he basically did his Zverev. He got to the chair and basically just kind of beat up on the chair on the chair where the umpire was sitting, and ended up getting defaulted. Now, mind you, when Zverev did it, it was at the end of the match, so of course he didn't lose the match. Well, he already lost the match, but with Ymer, they defaulted him. And you just wonder how all these things are. You wonder about the web and how things are connected.
Right, because I am still confused about that situation because in my mind, if you are a chair umpire, right, and we're playing on clay where we say you can go check a mark.
Correct.
If a play, no matter if you think from your seat, from the chair umpire seat, you already know what it is. What did it take for you to come out of that seat and go and to just verify? And guess what? If he had done that, there would have never even been a situation.
I agree.
So to me, I felt like the chair umpire is the one that really escalated that situation more so than Ymer did.
Absolutely agree.
How old is, off the top of my head, I don't know, how old is Ymer? Is this the sort of thing where this is just poorly timed, but he still has a lot of good years ahead, or is he on the older side? And this is
he probably in his mid-20s, right?
Yeah, I think he's probably 24, 25.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. Maybe 26. But yeah, definitely not older than that. Yeah, he's a young kid.
Right. Okay. And then while we're on the violations parade,
he's black too. I'm sorry.
Is that what'd you say, Bryce?
He might be from Sweden, but he's black too. So anyway, I'm sorry. Let me put that out there.
Oh wow. Well, speaking of a similar line of violations, but switching color, I guess. Jenson Brooksby.
Oh, you are hilarious.
Jenson Brooksby made the headlines with a provisional suspension this week too, or this past 2 weeks, didn't he?
He did. He sure did.
What's interesting to me about this one? I mean, procedurally, that's simply a period of ineligibility until they actually have a hearing that somebody either accepts or is given. But he's been injured. So I don't know much firsthand about what led to this, but I've seen it in other sports, particularly in boxing, where an athlete will come up dirty coming off of a rehab where they may have used some sort of performance-enhancing drug or steroid to help recover faster, and they're just caught dirty. It didn't cycle out. Yep. So I'm wondering what happened here. I don't know if you guys heard more about this, but the provisional suspension is fairly straightforward. I'm just not clear on the origin because I know he's been out for most of the last year.
Well, let me just add two things real quick. Number one, Isaac, you're dead on. I just looked up Emer's 24, so a
Okay.
good call on the age. Number two, all right, because we have talked to Jensen Brooksby before, and Jensen is another one that is who considers himself not in the in crowd.
Right.
Okay.
Right, of professional tennis.
Correct.
So he's not been one of this group of Americans that we see where they're all friends and happy-go-lucky and they got support from the USTA and all this. Jensen is very clear. He didn't get any of that.
Yeah, he is an outlier, that's for sure.
Yeah, so when you're talking, once again, I guess what I would say is consistent with Mikael Ymer is that they could both be potentially perceived as outsiders.
Right.
Interesting. So nails standing up that are getting hammered down here, perhaps.
Right.
Interesting. One that's, I think, regardless of whether or not she's an outlier, the last one that I noticed in the last couple of weeks was this strange conduct by Toth in the Hungarian Grand Prix. Had you seen anything like this before? I mean, certainly that falls under unsportsmanlike conduct. That one was governed not by the Grand Slam rules, obviously, but the WTA rules, which basically have the same definition for that. It could also be seen as dishonorable or unprofessional conduct, but that was a weird one. Did you guys get to watch that? I just read the headlines. I was like, really? How'd you even think you get away with that, even if it is your first tournament?
Yeah, I did not catch that.
Yeah, I didn't see it either. And typically, Paul, when a player goes and they erase a mark with their foot, they're basically saying that they're conceding it. Like it was, the call was either good or whatever. But in this particular situation, where I think she already had the benefit of it, she had the call in her favor. And
right.
I don't know if she thought that, okay, now it's going to get overturned and then to erase it. Yeah, that's shady.
I do actually remember seeing a preview of that, fellas. And so I guess what had happened was she was asking the umpire to check, and they were going back and forth and back and forth. And this was, again, kind of like that Ymer situation, Bryce, that you mentioned, where the umpire was like, I don't need to check it. And we going keep things moving, and Wang wouldn't let it go, and so they just were going back and forth, and finally the umpire was like, no, this is the ruling. And then I guess old girl, who I forgot what her name was, she was kind of fed up with it, so she was just like, and that's when she went up and she wiped out the mark, which made Wang even more upset.
Right.
So then she started crying.
Yep.
And it just got all crazy at that point. But yeah, I believe that's kind of how that thing went down. And, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, okay, they've made the call. All she needed to do is go down and check. And if she'd gotten back up in the chair, I mean, it probably would have continued, but everything would have been a little bit better. But yeah, I definitely, the opponent, like I said, it did not help when she, just kind of rubbed the call out. But she was, trying to, take up for her, she was at the point where she was like, look, the chair umpire said what they said. Let's keep it moving. Let's get this match going. And I mean, they were going back and forth. And so she then got frustrated and was like, yeah, I'm just going to wipe the mark off. So again, it was just not good for any of those three.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unless you're conceding the point, it's interference.
Yep.
Yeah. It's plain and simple.
Yeah.
Right. It's a pretty decent argument for at some point getting Hawkeye at all tournaments, big and small. But
absolutely, it'll take a lot of this away. I tell you, I'm definitely a fan for it.
But I'm going to throw something else out there.
Yeah. Okay.
I was originally fully in that camp of, okay, I like the Hawkeye because then you take away any questioning of calls. But Paul, I don't know about you, and Isaac, I don't know about you, but it seems like lately I have seen a couple of more missed Hawkeye type calls.
Yeah.
That I don't know if we didn't see those in the beginning or whatever. that makes it a little more questionable. Now, granted, even when you have a human person, you're going to have errors there, right?
Right.
So, but the whole Hawkeye thing is sold from the perspective of, this is 99.9999% accurate, right? And this is what you're going to use when you challenge anyway. So you might as well go with this call from the start. But I think there's more questions now about sometimes the accuracy.
Right. Well, it sounds like you might be out of curiosity now. I got to see how far into the old school you go. What's your feeling as far as umpires in baseball versus electronics that they're talking about, and instant replay in boxing versus referees?
Baseball? What's that?
Same sort of issue.
Oh man,
I've heard baseball, especially. I've heard debated on sports radio a lot. Boxing is maybe more particular to me, but.
I guess for me, I feel like technology can play a positive role in all of the different sports. I think honestly, Bryce, I agree with you wholeheartedly that it does seem like there is just sometimes when you're looking, you're like, really, was that there? But I honestly wonder if it's not. Because remember, there are multiple technologies out there. So you've got Hawkeye, you've got ShotSpot, you've got all these different. So I just wonder, what is the kind of what's the threshold that they're using in the technology, and is that good enough? Because again, like you're saying, I do see instances where I'm like, whoo, that really seemed like that was out, and then
Think
it
about
comes
this
back
weekend.
and yeah, like this. Oh, now see, so Paul, we were at the UTS event, the Ultimate Tennis Showdown event, and I tell you what, there was a bunch of calls. They definitely needed to reboot.
I love that reboot.
They need to do a reboot.
I mean, who they have as judges there? I mean, was it like Danny Davis from the 80s WWF?
I remember there was one shot in particular, and you're right, Isaac, there were several, but I know you remember that one that call that was on the outside of the doubles line.
Yes.
There was one shot that the whole stadium knew that was out. And you heard the stadium. I mean, it was that obvious. And I think it was against Monfils, because I think Monfils was just kind of like
really?
And to his credit, he continued playing the point. But everybody in the stadium knew that shot was out. So
you can only hope that for the bigger tournaments that they are looking to have, I guess technology that's going to be a bit more tight, if that makes any sense, as far as, again, the threshold of error.
Right.
But yeah, I do think that there may be some, there may be some low budget versions out there that might be like, hey, we'll give you 92%. How about that? And they're like, yeah, why not? Let's go with the 92%. Whereas, okay, if you're at a main event, 500,000 Grand Slam, look, you need that thing to be 99.9. And if you don't have a threshold like that, then I'm sorry. You need to get that money out and spend to get the right version.
Right.
So,
and
just saying.
And the other thing that concerns me just a little bit is, and I guess all industries deal with this, right? When you bring in technology, then that usually equates to the elimination of some human jobs, right? And then when you think of our sport, there are just certain kind of like staples that have been there, lines people, and judges and what are we going to now start having like drains around the court where you don't need the ball kids anymore. and these type of things where it's like they're part of the sport, right?
Yeah.
A lot of professional tennis players started off as ball kids.
That's true.
I mean, how many people have started off or have done things in tennis from the volunteer standpoint? And I'm not saying, okay, because of that, don't use the technology, but there are other considerations in terms of how, when you bring that in, it does impact the spirit of the sport.
Absolutely. That's true. That's very true.
That's where I was going with baseball and boxing when I posed that question a few moments ago. Some people are like, oh, no, you got to keep the umpires and refs. That's part of the game.
Right.
But if they're blowing calls, I mean, whether it's home runs or knockdowns, I mean, that could have serious impact in some sports. So I could definitely see both arguments: tradition versus just getting it right. It just depends what camp you fall into, I guess.
Right.
So,
right.
But
So can we go back to Ymer for just one more second? So I know that you stated that right now it's at the decision that came down from like the highest appellate court.
yeah, the court of arbitration for sport is usually your last stop if your sport chooses to use it as its court of appeals. So
okay, so with this 18-month suspension, so are you saying that this is sticking?
Yeah, the one exception, as I mentioned, is with they could appeal the Court of Arbitration of Sport to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland. And to my knowledge, that's not frequently done, but it's a mechanism that is there. But generally, the CAS is recognized as the last stop in a lot of these major sports disputes. I mean, just to name a few, recently in track and field, Caster Semenya, her matter was basically found its ending point there. Staying on track and field, you had Oscar Pistorius, before he became known for far more sinister things, taking his challenge of as whether he could use the blades he was running on. That went up to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and then he was allowed in the Olympics accordingly once they ruled there. So some of the biggest disputes you could think of, especially in amateur and Olympic sports, have gone up there, and they usually stop there. But there is that option if somebody actually wanted to take it up of going to the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Mikael better call Ben Crump.
In another jurisdiction.
Oh my goodness. Well, Paul, I mean, these have been some really good topics to bring up, and we've not had this before. Someone to be able to come on and to give us, the legal or the regulation rules side of things for a lot of these various situations. So thank you so much for coming on again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I was just happy we had a few with Kyrgios out with an injury this year. So.
Well, I'm assuming he'll be back for the U.S. Open, so maybe we'll have a few incidents to talk about.
By the way, before I forget, before we go off, one interesting thing. I don't know where this is going, but Kyrgios had a post yesterday with a picture with Mike Tyson saying, "Big announcement coming soon" or something on Instagram. I'm like, what is this guy doing next? Did you hear about this yet, or do you see that? I was like, is he boxing? What is he doing? That'd be insane.
I saw the picture, and FYI, the event that we were at this weekend, this UTF event, Tyson was there, as well as Kyrgios. So I know that kind of puts them together. So I'm not sure what kind of project they've got coming up, but Tyson's daughter is a very, very good tennis player.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. How old is she?
What, she's maybe like 14, 15 maybe, Bryce?
Yeah, she's young.
She's young, yeah.
But she is a very good junior tennis player.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So, I wonder if it has something to do with that. That to me seems a little bit more, in line versus Kyrgios jumping and doing anything on the boxing side. That's for sure.
I don't know.
He gets
heavyweight title holder Alexander Usyk is looking for somebody after Fury went to Francis Ngannou for his next fight.
And I just looked it up. Tyson's daughter is 13.
13.
Tennis.
Got it.
Okay. I'd say she still has a minute bit between Andreeva and then when Coco Gauff got started, maybe another year or two or three before she really gets rolling, I guess. She's going to go next level.
Yeah. And they have it down here. She is currently training to become a professional tennis player.
There you go.
Wow. She's going to take the Iron nickname is the question.
Right. Exactly. So, well, Paul, before we go, do you want to take once again an opportunity to just kind of pitch, your law services to our audience?
Well, sure. I'm never shy about taking that opportunity. Yes. As far as anyone who's interested that's probably listening to this, I do have quite an extensive background in sports law, which is one of my major areas of representation. I have represented 5 world champions in boxing and MMA. I've represented dozens of other athletes in combat sport and in other sports, actually including tennis, and happy to represent any of you that might be listening as need be, whether it's regulatory or in litigation or what have you. I'm here for you. And once again, I thank the two of you for this opportunity. I always enjoy myself on here.
We always enjoy having you, Paul. And thank you again for all the support that you've given. It is greatly appreciated.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, until the next set of incidents, we're going to go ahead and close this one up. So thank you, Paul. And on behalf of the podcast, this has been your boy, Bryce.
And this is your boy, Isaac.
And we are Brothers on Tennis. Everyone, be well.
Take care, everybody.